Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Zaka Jacob. India has created history today. India has got its first ever tribal woman president in Droupadi Murmu. The Prime Minister, one of the first to call on the new president-elect, presenting her with a bouquet of flowers. This goes way beyond symbolism, ladies and gentlemen. It's a story of inspiration. It is also a story of aspiration. Droupadi Murmu today represents tens of millions of Adivasis, tribals, underprivileged, people who come from very poor and humble backgrounds. Her story, her life story is an inspiration for anyone across this country who is not born into privilege. It's a message that if she can do it, then so can you. These are images of the Home Minister also calling on the new president-elect just moments ago. This is a moment of elation, not just for the BJP or the NDA government. This is a moment of elation for all of us as Indians. Like I said, it goes beyond the symbolism because it's not just about electing the first tribal woman president of India. It was a landslide victory. She defeated her opposition candidate Yashwant Sinha by sweeping more than 70% of the Electoral College votes. Remember, here is a lady who is not born in privilege, who has come from the back of the beyond, literally, in Mayurbhanj district in Odisha, and is today occupying the highest constitutional post in this country. She has become the first citizen of this country. And it is this remarkable story that we need to celebrate as Indians, cutting across political divides. But first, the story of the day. All right, it indeed is a historic day. The counting is still not over. Remember, at the end of the third round of vote counting in the Electoral College, this is where Droupadi Murmu's count stands at. It's 5,77,777. 5 lakh was the magic figure. Remember, it's an Electoral College of a little over 10 lakhs. And the moment you cross the halfway mark of 5 lakh plus, then you have a simple majority, and that is what Droupadi Murmu has. By the end of the count, there are 10 more states left to be counted. By the end of this count, she will well have won almost 70% of this vote. Yashwant Sinha just getting 2,61,000. He was one of the first. In fact, he conceded defeat and also congratulated Droupadi Murmu. So she is now officially the next, that is the 15th president of the Republic of India. I also want to bring you up to speed with a side story that's happened in this election. There has been a significant number of cross voters. At least 17 members of parliament cutting across opposition ranks have voted for Droupadi Murmu. In the MLAs count, it's much larger. As of the third round of counting, 104 MLAs have cross-voted. That includes 22 MLAs from Assam, 19 MLAs from Madhya Pradesh, 16 MLAs from Maharashtra, 10 MLAs from Haryana, another 10 MLAs from Jharkhand. So clearly, there was something about this candidature that prompted many an MLA from the opposition ranks to break ranks with the opposition candidate and vote for Droupadi Murmu. What may that be, and where does this story go? Like I said at the top, it's a story of more than symbolism. It's a story of inspiration to tens of millions in this country who are not born into privilege, that if Droupadi Murmu can aspire to and become the first citizen of this country, occupy the highest constitutional post in this country, then so can the tens of millions of this country. Let me now go across to our special panel that's joining us tonight Here on Brass Tacks, Nalin Kohli is BJP National Spokesperson, Supriya Srinath, Congress National Spokesperson, also in charge of Congress's social media, Rashid Kidwai, author and journalist, Abhijit Majumdar is consulting editor with First Post. Let me start with Nalin Kohli. I said right at the top, the story goes beyond just symbolism. It's about aspiration, hope, and perhaps most importantly, a reflection of a new India where you don't have to be born into privilege, but through hard work, you can aspire to and can reach the highest office in the land.
I think, Zaka, that's a fair assessment and comment that you made. It's also a comment on the politics of entitlement. In terms of, I am so-and-so, I'm born into a certain family, so I shall certainly have the right to do so-and-so. That is over. This is New India, where anyone and everyone can aspire on the basis of their achievements, make it to the highest post in the land. Droupadi Murmu ji is an inspiring story of someone who was born not in a privileged family. She is the first Adivasi or tribal president of India. That she's a lady makes it doubly important. She worked from the grassroots as a councillor to an MLA to a minister in Odisha, discharged her responsibilities in a manner that earned her laurels. Finally, she was governor of Jharkhand, and today she's the president of India. It's a day of celebration. Of course, the opposition chose not to support her, but that is a democracy. It's their right. I think now that we have the president, we should move on beyond the comments that were rather regrettable during the campaign, which in a sense should not have taken place when we are talking of the first citizen of the country. However, be that as it may, it's a day of celebration for all Indians, irrespective of their political leanings, irrespective of their political ideologies, irrespective of where they are from. We should celebrate and look at it as India in its 75th year, what Prime Minister Modi proposed and the BJP and NDA put forth for everyone has been achieved, and we have an historic moment. History has been made.
Okay. I want to ask Supriya Srinath, did the opposition miss a trick? I'll get into the cross-voting in a moment, but did the opposition miss a trick in as much as this was not just another election? The fact that India is getting its first tribal woman president of this country, it goes beyond politics. Should the opposition have sensed that mood amongst legislators themselves? And I believe that the numbers of cross-voting is a reflection of that leadership. So various opposition parties, not just the Congress, various opposition parties were simply not able to sense the historic nature of this election.
So first up, like my leader has, I would like to congratulate our President-elect, Srimati Droupadi Murmu ji. And it is indeed a big day for India in its 75th year of independence that we will have a first tribal woman president. But I'm presuming that she's going to be a lot more than just that one identity. And the reason why I say so is because symbolism in politics takes you this far and no further. We've had just demitting office Sri Kovind ji, who was a Dalit president. Are Dalits any better off in India than they were 5 years back, especially in states ruled by the BJP? The atrocities and the crimes against Dalits have actually gone up in India in the last 8 years. So I'm just saying politics of symbolism is important. It must be good, but I don't think it serves a purpose beyond a point. As far as the opposition missing an opportunity is concerned, I think, Zaka, I'm going to be very candid here. I think this was not a fight between Srimati Droupadi Murmu ji, who comes from a certain background, or Yashwant Sinha ji, who comes from another. I do think this was a fight between two ideologies, two very opposing ideologies, two ideologies that have a very different idea of the country that we live in. There is one ideology that stands for some things, and we are diametrically opposite to that. We believe that this country should be united. We believe this country should talk about the poor first. We believe that this country should talk about the rights of the poor first. I mean, Droupadi Murmu ji is going to be my president as well. And on your show and your platform, I do want to make a clarion call to her. And I want to say, Madam President, please ensure that what the government is trying to do with the lives and livelihood of tribals in the name of amending the Forest Act of 2006 does not go through. You owe it to your tribals, brothers and sisters, because you know their plight better perhaps than most other people will. I do want to implore my president and say, when a tribal woman is burnt in Madhya Pradesh, the government cannot look the other way. Because if we are talking and celebrating her tribal origins, we need to talk more about
fair enough.
other things than
We'll
just
get into the
symbolism.
legislative agenda. I'm sure we have another 5 years for that. But I want to ask you, you said, you know, symbolism can only get you thus far. But Supriya, in politics, doesn't symbolism play a huge role? And in fact, many would say that all politics has some amount of symbolism in it. When K.R. Narayanan became the first Dalit president of India, it was symbolic, but it was important, wasn't it? When UPA was in power and you chose Pratibha Patil as the first woman president of India, it was symbolic, but it was important. It was also historic, wasn't it?
So I was candid enough to not deny it. I said I'm going to be candid and I will say symbolism is important. But symbolism takes you thus far and no further. And the reason why I say this is because these symbolic gestures are good. They perhaps even need to be done. But are they going to affect the governance of this country? Are they going to make tribals and the way corporates are actually out there taking away their land and livelihood and facilitated by the government? That's all that I'm asking, because I think I want to go back 5 years when Mr. Kovind was elected, and I remember that day very distinctly. I will just say I was a journalist then. We thought it was a great thing that had happened. But look at the atrocities against Dalit people today. Look at how they are denied simple, basic ease of living.
Let me go to Rashid.
That's what the symbolism is all about.
For me, the thing that stood out is earlier in the day today, when the results were coming out, we went to our colleague who is reporting from Mayurbhanj, which is the native district of Droupadi Murmu, and she spoke with a young schoolgirl, a tribal schoolgirl, must be about 12 or 15 years of age. And she said something very stark. To me, that captures the essence of this election. She said, if Droupadi Murmu, coming from my same place, can today be in the highest office in this land, then that's an inspiration for all of us. She's sending out a message that so can I, and so can millions like me, who are just like her, who may not be born into a wealthy family, who may not be born into privilege, but if she can do it, then so can I. And I think that sums up why this election is historic. And to that extent, Rashid, do you believe that in the 75th year of independence, maybe we should have thought beyond political lines, maybe the opposition should have come together with the government and said, okay, there is a historicity in this candidature, therefore we are suspending our political differences and we will back this candidate?
Zaka, first of all, I mean, we all should congratulate her, and it's indeed a historical day. But I'm not too sure about this thing that opposition giving a walkover, because in democracy is all about numbers. There is no concept of consensus in democracy. It's a misnomer. See, we have had 16 presidential elections, and barring one in Neelam Sanjeeva Reddy's case, every time there was a contest, I am as a citizen, I'm little, I was disappointed when, the independents were debarred from contesting. I mean, now only people who can get, 50 proposals and seconders, etc., only they can contest. But that's to weed out the, non-serious players in the presidential election. But this is not a big, and there so many people have come from, modest background. You look at Gyani Jail Singh, who was a carpenter, of course, K.R. Narayanan, you had mentioned. So there's several people have come, and they have made APJ Kalam also, one can name in that category. And they have done very well for the country, for society, for nation. And I'm sure President Murmu would take it to another level.
No, so if you look at, for example, the number of cross voters, and I want to ask Abhijit Majumdar this, there's got to be an explanation for why 104 MLAs, and this, by the way, mind you, there are 10 more states to be counted. So this is just at the end of the third round of counting, where 20 states have been counted, or 19 states have been counted, and there are 104 MLAs and 17 MPs who have cross-voted. Now, it's one thing to say all politicians are thugs, they would have done it for money or whatever. I don't want to get into that. Fact is, I think leaderships of political parties, leaderships of opposition parties in this instance, have missed a trick. And the trick is this, that they were not able to sense how people were willing to look beyond their political affiliations to vote for this candidate, because they sensed, individual MLAs sensed, that there is a historic nature in this election, there's a historic nature in this candidate, and therefore they're willing to break ranks with their own parties.
Zaka, Droupadi Murmu ji as presidential candidate this time was politically unputdownable. You know, most people who cross-voted realized that they would do their own careers a bit disservice. They realized the historic nature of this entire election and the candidature, and which is why they couldn't vote against Droupadi Murmu. They voted with Droupadi Murmu. I am a great admirer of Rashid Bhai's political acumen, understanding. But I want to say something. Democracy, yes, democracy is about numbers, not about consensus. I understand, we all understand that. But there are times, I'm just talking cold politics here. Opposition sometimes, in cases like a Balakot attack, for instance, or a Uri surgical strike, if opposition had actually sided with the government, it would have, it would not have lost credibility and appeal in the eyes of this 1.4 billion citizenry. It missed a trick. Even this time, they were anyway going to lose. There was no harm in just being a little magnanimous, having a consensus about Droupadi Murmu ji. As about whether this is symbolic and, how symbolic, how powerful the message, I have, for a brief part of my childhood, very early childhood, I've lived, my father was posted, so I lived in a tiny place called Khuti. Khuti has now grown into a town and all that. At that time, there were hardly any pakka ghar hi bahut kam the. So he was working in PSU. And it's a completely tribal area. And if I'm not wrong, Birsa Munda is from there. Now, I have seen with my eyes the kind of struggle, the kind of life that tribals, especially tribal women, they would walk walk for miles to just get drinking water. There was somebody called Bharali who would bring drinking water from miles away to to that small town, then some villages around it. There were others like her. So for, people, probably some of us don't understand the power of the message that Droupadi Murmu ji is, being the president of India, the Prime Minister standing for her at events, the armed forces saluting her as their commander-in-chief. That is something else. One should understand it's a very, very powerful decision. Imagery. It's a very, very powerful, call it symbolism, but what this does is, this tells that person, that little boy or girl in some remotest part of India, that I can someday be there.
Yeah.
And I can work my way up. It's a very powerful message. It is not something to be taken very lightly. It's not just another presidential election.
No, I absolutely agree. And to say that symbolism will only take you thus far, well, point taken, but then symbolism is a big part of politics. Let me get Nalin Kohli to respond to that, and then I'll come back to you, Supriya. Nalin Kohli, what the opposition is saying, you heard what Supriya is saying, that A, it's symbolic. They're using the comparable example of, we just had a Dalit president, Ramnath Kovind. But how much has the plight of Dalits improved in the last 5 years? Nalin.
Well, how much did the plight of Dalits then improve under K.R. Narayanan ji? Well, this is the Congress party's opposition to find fault with everything. I mean, to put it bluntly, how many people died during COVID of starvation? I can recall decade after decade, people dying of starvation. And mostly they used to be Dalits and underprivileged people, whether they were tribals. Have you ever heard a story like that, Zaka? You've covered it long enough. And if Supriya will just go back to her old days of not being a political spokesperson, she'll recall it too. She won't have selective amnesia on that. The point is that the government of today, which is Prime Minister Modi's government and which is the government of all Indians, whether the Congress likes it or doesn't like it, is a fact that this government gave food grains to 80 crore people at the time when everyone needed it. So therefore, it's not about symbolism, it's about work. It's about dignity. When toilets are built or if a gas connection is given, and 7 to 8 crore of those women who have the Ujjwala gas connections, they buy the second cylinder, the third cylinder. Because there's dignity, they don't have to burn firewood, burn their eyes or trouble their health. They are Dalits. They are underprivileged. They are poor people. They are tribals. So it's not symbolism, it's work. And therefore to run down Droupadi Murmu ji and say, no, I am expecting you to rise above symbolism. She doesn't need anybody's advice because she rose beyond it when she served. From a councillor to an MLA, from an MLA to a minister to a governor, she did it. It wasn't symbolism. You don't win elections on symbolism. You win elections with work. And that's something, of course, that's how we function, that's how we believe in it. The opposition party wishes not to believe in it, it's their choice. And in honesty.
So Priya, I know it's not a comparable example because one was a direct election, this is an indirect election. But why is there a historic nature of an Obama being the first black president of the US? Because it is symbolism. It is the symbolism of being the first black man to occupy that office. Therefore, I mean, if you were to look at a similar story of a person coming from a deeply underprivileged class of our country, in a remote part of our country, to rise through the sheer dint of her hard work to get to the highest office in this land is no less a story, symbolic or otherwise.
I thought I started off the show with saying this is a huge day. So I'm not disputing the symbolism. What I'm disputing is the selective claims of the BJP. Just for your reference, and I want to say some things which are very pertinent to this debate. Every 15 minutes, there's a crime against Dalit in this country has gone up steeply under your government. 45 lakh people in this country died due to no treatment, no oxygen available due to COVID. You have not been able to dispute those numbers. And Ujjwala, sir, 5 crore women have not been able to refill those cylinders. Let's not get there. As far as this election, Zaka, was concerned, I started off by saying it's an election to India's highest office, but it is an election where there are two competing ideologies. There is one ideology which believes that if you come from minorities, if you come from a certain, other linguistic group, you are not as Indian. And there is another that believes, no, all of us are Indians and we have equal say on the high table. And I would want to point out one thing here. It's all very good that we talk about symbolism. We should have a Dalit president. We should indeed have a tribal woman president. How many Dalit chief ministers does the BJP have in 17 of its states? How many Dalit chiefs of the RSS have been elected so far? You know what the number has been selected so far? The number is a huge zero for both those answers. You know how many Dalit presidents has the BJP had? One. Caught, of course, accepting bribe. You know how many Dalit chief ministers has the Congress party had? Several. At least 6 that come to my mind. 3 Dalit presidents of the Indian National Congress. We made the first Dalit president. We got the first Dalit woman speaker. The first leader of opposition in Rajya Sabha is a Dalit, who's Mr. Khadge. So let's move beyond symbolism. Put people in positions of executive power. Are you going to make one chief minister who's a Dalit in the 17 states that you are
I want to
Will you do that?
Rashid, I want to take the point. Rashid, I want to take the point that you made that there's no concept of consensus. It is a contest at the end of the day, and in a contest somebody wins, somebody loses. But even in that context, pray explain why today Mamata Banerjee has said that her party is not going to be backing either Mr. Dhankar or Margaret Alva. That one of the principal opposition parties in this country is saying we are going to abstain in a vice presidential election. And this is what, the number 2 opposition party in parliament? I mean, what is going on? I mean, yes, I take your point about it being a contest, but this is not a contest.
Yeah. No, Zaka, you have raised a very valid point. See, that tells you the story of, why opposition is such a disarray. You see that Mr. Yashwant Sinha was nobody's candidate as such. He didn't come from Congress, and, Trinamool was very indifferent, and So therefore, the outcome really reflects that. And we must also remember that whip is not, political parties cannot enforce whip in presidential election, nor can they take disciplinary action against those who have cross-voted as such. So we must know this. And to say this kind of thing that about Balakot, the opposition should have sided with the government. I mean, there are 17 crore votes that the opposition got at in that election. Are we questioning that? So you see, our elections are not a singular issue based. There are a lot of things are there, and people pick and choose, and they should have a right to choose and vote.
No, but Rashid, no. I think the point that Abhijit was also trying to make is, don't there come moments in politics where you have to go past the political divide? I can think of, for example,
what happened in K.R. Narayanan's election. Let us go back. It's not so. What happened in K.R. Narayanan's election? You please respond. He came from very modest background. His story was very inspirational.
He was the first Dalit president of this country. Why did they choose
you
to
cannot marshal such arguments.
I mean, these are questions that will be asked.
Okay, Abhijit.
Why did Pratibha Patil get opposed?
Abhijit, respond. When the Congress put up the first Dalit president, the first woman president, it's not like the BJP, which was in opposition at that time, backed that candidate.
No, I'm saying that Congress has the full right to sort of put up and just do give a tit for tat to the BJP. I was just questioning the political, whether Congress gains politically by this or doesn't. That's all. I mean, Congress is completely in its right to put up whoever. I mean, it's unfortunate that they've put up a candidate like Yashwant Sinha.
No, one second. Supriya, let him finish, please. Yeah,
you may have an issue with that.
Yeah, let him finish, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Unfortunate that, in front of Droupadi Murmu, there is Yashwant Sinha, who's pretty embittered. He has been abusive on Twitter and social media, and I don't know. Frankly, there was no contest. It was evident to everybody. You can see it from the cross voting. So my point is not about what Congress can, what Congress can't. The point is that it could have taken a higher ground by saying that, okay.
As Rashid said, Yashwant Sinha was no one's first choice. I think there was this whole sort of mahal that was built around Sharad Pawar. Mr. Pawar, for whatever reason, either health reasons or maybe he realizes the numbers were not there, he decided not to contest. I think then somebody else proposed Farooq Abdullah's name. Again, Farooq Abdullah's name did not fly. So Mr. Sinha at best was the third best choice. But be that as it may, I want to ask Supriya this. When Mamata Banerjee says, and we've all seen, it's public knowledge, it's in the public domain, the kind of run-ins she's had with Jagdeep Dhankar, and yet she says, I'm not going to vote against him, I'm not going to vote for him. And Margaret Alba, you may feel is an important candidate, she's a minority candidate, a woman candidate, and you have one of the most vocal, in fact the only woman chief minister in the country right now, saying I'm not going to back her either. So where then is this opposition unity that you cite?
So Zaka, just very quickly, I do not hold a brief for the Trinamool Congress, and I think somebody from the Trinamool should have been present here to answer that very question, because it baffles me as well. But I don't hold a brief for them and I cannot answer that question. As far as the opposition unity is concerned, and I know everybody is too quick to point out how fragile that is, please understand, an election of a president or a vice president is very different from what general elections 2024 will look like. There are huge issues plaguing this country, issues that we are raising every day. And I do not know what the reasons for the TMC to abstain from that vote is concerned. I can only say that we do not miss one opportunity and we will never be intimidated, irrespective of who tries to intimidate us. And that is why we are the Indian National Congress. That's all that I will say. I don't think I hold a brief for TMC.
No. I think you're missing the essence of what I was trying to ask. That in 2021 in Bengal, I know there was an attempt to try and form some kind of a rainbow coalition of opposition parties. That didn't come through. So eventually the Congress and the left allied. And, the results are there for everyone to see. So clearly, Mamata Banerjee there was protecting her turf. In this case, I'm not sure what it is, because it's bizarre that the second largest opposition bloc in parliament is not supporting the opposition candidate for vice president. Yes, the numbers are stacked up against you, no doubt about it, just like the numbers were stacked up in the presidential election. But why is that? Why is the second largest opposition party not backing the opposition candidate? It baffles me. And then to say that opposition unity is intact and it's different for the 24 election, different for this election, I think if anything, it's going to splinter further. Anyway, I want to go.
How do you expect me to answer a question for what the Trinamool is doing or
No,
not
I'm
doing?
not asking
I
you.
mean, the
I'm not
Trinamool
asking you
should
to
be
answer on
supporting the
behalf of the
opposition
Trinamool.
candidate.
All I'm asking
And
you
quite
is,
frankly-
all I'm
and
asking,
quite
all I'm
frankly-
questioning is this presupposition that you've made that the 24 election everybody will come together, but this election they won't. But anyway, yes, Nalin.
Zaka, I wish to make a comment because I've been hearing patiently. So I just probably, from my perspective, look at it, that there are two models in the country. Because, we've been speaking about how proud, and Supriya, of course, as her party spokesperson, is entitled to be fully proud of her party, believe in its ideology, and she should, like I would for mine. There are two models in the country. There is a model that's based that we believe this is how it should be, a top-down, look at everybody and say, we've figured it out, we are going to do it that way. And another one which says, this is what our plan is, we are implementing it on the ground and letting you decide in the next elections. We have seen the 14 election, we've seen the 19 election. That's the Modi model. You deliver, let the beneficiaries decide.
All right, Nalin, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but the final vote count is coming through, so I want to go live to those pictures. The Rajya Sabha Secretary General is addressing.
11 a.m. today, the 21st of July 2022, in room number 63, Parliament House, New Delhi. The ballot box used in the Parliament House was first opened, followed by that of states where members of Parliament had cast their votes. The ballot papers of members of legislative assemblies who voted at Parliament House were also segregated and kept separately. Thereafter, counting of votes cast by members of Parliament commenced, followed by the states in alphabetical order. During scrutiny, the valid and invalid ballot papers were separated and the value of first preference votes polled in favor of each candidate was determined. 4754 votes were polled, out of which 4,701 were valid and 53 were invalid. The quota sufficient to get a candidate elected was determined by dividing the total number of first preference votes secured by both the candidates by 2 and then adding 1 to the quotient. The said quota was 5,28,491. Srimati Droupadi Murmu had secured 2,824 first preference votes, value of which is 6,76,803. 2,824 first preference votes, the value of which is 6,76,803. 1,877 first preference votes were secured by Shri Yashwant Sinha, value of which is 3,80,177. As the first preference vote secured by Srimati Droupadi Murmu was greater than the requisite quota, I, in my capacity as returning officer, declared that Srimati Droupadi Murmu has been duly elected to the office of the President of India. Now, I will be forwarding to the Election Commission of India Form 7 under Rule 35(1)(c), which is the return of election to the office of the President of India, and also a declaration of result of election under Section 11 of the Presidential and Vice Presidential Election Act 1952, read with Rule 35 of the Presidential and Vice Presidential Elections Rules 1974. Election Commission of India would then prepare the certificate of election of Shri Droupadi Murmu as the President of India, jointly signed by Honorable Chief Election Commissioner of India, Shri Rajiv Kumar, and Honorable Election Commissioner Shri Anup Chandra Pandey. Overall, the 16th presidential election was conducted in a free, fair and orderly manner in Parliament House and across all state capitals in the country. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the candidates and their authorized representatives for their cooperation, which facilitated early completion of the proceedings. I would also like to convey my humble congratulations to Srimati Droupadi Murmu.
Right, so the Rajya Sabha Secretary General confirming the final tally: 6,76,803 Electoral College votes to Droupadi Murmu and 3,80,177 to Yashwant Sinha. So it's an emphatic victory for Droupadi Murmu. Almost 60% of the vote, 65% of the vote has gone to Droupadi Murmu, and that is an indication of just how many people have voted, not just from within the NDA fold, but from outside the NDA fold, perhaps recognizing the historic nature of this candidacy and of this candidate. And that's why she has polled these record numbers: 6,76,803 and 3,80,177 to Yashwant Sinha. Nalin Kohli, again, like I said, the numbers are staggering in and of itself. It also is an indication of how many people from non-NDA parties have voted in favor of the NDA candidate.
So, ultimately, it was a candidature that had merit in it. I mean, of course, we have the numbers with us. It could have been unanimous, but that's okay. It doesn't matter if the Congress and other parties didn't. We would just hope that instead of imploring and giving a directive to the President of India that this is our agenda, so that through the President they can run their political agenda, they would focus in not running her down anymore and stop referring to her as an evil philosophy. So once we move beyond that, I'm sure Indian democracy will prosper.
Do you want to respond to that? I mean, there were unneeded comments, comments like a rubber stamp. One of your fellow colleagues, Supriya, said that she represents an evil philosophy. I mean, running down of a candidate whose very candidature had a certain historicity to it, that didn't help your case either.
No. And Zaka, I would want to correct you on air because the news agency has had to issue a corrigendum. So I would just implore, please do not resort to any WhatsApp forwards on this. ANI that misquoted him has come on record to say Dr. Ajoy Kumar was misquoted. He never said she represents an evil philosophy. He was talking about what the BJP represents. First up, I want to clarify that. Please do not go back to saying those things. I only want to say she's going to be my president as well. Why will I not implore her? Why will I not seek her to actually put an end to, impacting lives and livelihoods of tribals, Adivasis and Dalits all across in forests in India, which the BJP is hell-bent on doing? Why will I not ask my president to look into how a woman is being burnt alive in Madhya Pradesh ruled by the BJP? A tribal woman. I will do that. I have every business to. And I just want to go back to this whole point that, the Congress could have thought about coming on board. No, the Congress could not have. Just like you did not think that K.R. Narayanan should have been India's unanimously elected first Dalit president. Just like you did not think that Srimati Pratibha Patilji should have been unanimously elected India's first female president. What a powerful symbolism that would have been. But you did not choose to because you were competing with an ideology that we stand for, and this is what democracy is all about. I mean, why are we shying away
fair
from
enough.
contest?
Fair enough. I mean, like all the panelists have said, opposition was well within its right to put up a candidate. There are two things. One, could you have put up a better fight, maybe a better candidate? And two, given that the NDA chose this candidate whose election has a historic nature to it, could there have been an attempt to try and see if political divides could have been bridged? But anyway, be that as it may, I want to show two images, if I may, please. Today there were two defining images, and because we live in the world of electronic media and live television pictures, Rashid, please weigh in on this. The Congress party today hit the streets in a way that, frankly, we haven't seen in the last many weeks and months. Perhaps the last time was when Rahul Gandhi was called for ED questioning, but today they hit the streets for Sonia Gandhi being called for questioning by the Enforcement Directorate. Later in the evening, the BJP hit the streets to celebrate the election of Droupadi Murmu as India's first tribal president. Just talk to us through the contrasting nature of these two pictures. And for me, this encapsulates the politics of our times and perhaps why, one set of politics seems to be able to capture the imagination of the people of this country better than the other.
Yes, Akash, so there is one picture is of, of victory and the other one is of survival. Because remember, the Congress is fighting a very grim battle of survival actually. And the protests, what Congress had planned, has more to do with the way enforcement directorate has been functioning, where a process becomes a kind of punishment. We do not know whether Rahul Gandhi or Sonia Gandhi are accused or they are witnesses. So these are the things that would prompt any political party and any person. Zaka, we have discussed this, as per the government admission by the minister in parliament, there were, over 2,500 raids or cases by ED, and the rate of conviction was very little, less than 4% or so. So what about honor and dignity of all those people who were, raided or questioned and then nothing came out? So these are the
Look, Rashid, all
democracy.
I'm saying is, of course, the Congress party has every right to protest, and so they should. As long as it's peaceful, nobody has a problem with it. The only question that's being asked is, I think somebody put this up on Twitter also today, whether Mallikarjun Kharge and Pawan Bansal, who were questioned in this same scam, no one came out to the streets to protest for them. But when Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi are questioned by the Enforcement Directorate in the same case, somehow life comes to a standstill.
Yeah, but that still doesn't, explain the conduct of enforcement directorate. Is it is corruption only taking place in among opposition leaders?
Okay.
How is it that everyone who's named in ED for last 2 years or so belongs to the opposition? I'm talking about in the political spectrum.
Okay, fair enough. Abhijit, I mean, this is a familiar charge against this government that they use agencies like the ED, CBI, IT, etc. as veritable arms of.
It's only fair that I'm given some time to speak.
Yeah. Once I'll come to you. I'll come back to you. I'll circle back to you. But
the
Abhijit,
process is for everybody, na? Just like Supriya just said that Narayanan and Pratibha Patil, etc. Fine. I mean, Modi also sat for hours for sit patiently without BJP jumping up and down. They only, Congress people only come out when, when the Gandhis are touched. Kaun hai? Why can't she submit? She has been given enough latitude for COVID. She has to come. This is not some monarchy or something. Everybody, submits themselves to, Amit Shah has, Chidambaram has, Modi has, everybody has.
Okay.
Who are the Gandhis to demand this kind of exceptionalism? And why does, Congress this level of fierce protest? We do not see even, on other issues over other leaders. So fine, I mean, if Congress
Mr. Majumdar, I think you're overstepping your brief as an analyst here to give
let me
of the
finish.
Congress party.
Yeah,
I think it's only
30
fair
seconds
and
more.
I
30 seconds more.
interrupted
Let him finish, please.
It's
30
only fair
seconds
I'm
more.
giving
I'll
a
come back
choice.
to you,
I
Supriya.
didn't interrupt.
Supriya, 30 seconds more, please. Yeah, Abhijit, finish.
Yeah, so, if the Congress feels that this is the politics that is going to get them forward, best of luck to them. I do not feel, this is terrible optics. This is actually bad politics.
Okay.
And this is the kind of elitism that India has repeatedly rejected and will reject in the future.
Supriya, respond.
There are 36 people in this country who have defaulted on banks of at least 1,000 crore rupees. Today morning's big headline in newspaper. 255 people cumulatively have defaulted nearly 2.5 lakh crore rupees, which is more than the GDP of 87 countries. The BJP, its frontals, the CBI and the ED find no time to question any of these people. The reality is that the ED, the CBI and the income tax have become frontal agencies of the BJP to settle their personal petty political scores. If you are an opposition leader, you will be hounded, fabricated cases will be filed against you, or you will be put behind jail where bail is the norm. If you join the BJP, आप गंगा नहाकर सर्फ से दाग धब्बे धोकर साफ होकर, पवित्र होकर भारतीय जनता पार्टी में शामिल हो जाते हैं। हेमंत बिस्व शर्मा, मुकुल रॉय, नारायण राणे, शिंदे, I can go on and on and on. And how these agencies are used to topple democratically elected governments is another debate for another day. So let us not. One second.
I'm getting live
What is
pictures.
this
I'm
business
really
about the
sorry. I'm
Congress
really sorry to interrupt. I'm getting live pictures. This is Droupadi Murmu coming out and meeting with all the people who were the polling agents, some of the ministers who were in charge of our election. You can see Law and Justice Minister Kiran Rijiju there. You can see the Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan. All of them greeting her with a bouquet. And of course, this election, like I've been saying, represents a historic candidature and a historic election, because for the very first time, the occupant of Rashtrapati Bhavan will be a tribal woman. It goes beyond the symbolism of that election. It is about aspiration. It is about inspiration. And I think you can see that in the people who have turned up there to congratulate her, because they realize that this story goes far beyond just one individual, in this case, Droupadi Murmu. You can see Arjun Munda there. You can see all other leaders of the BJP and also leaders from other political parties who have come there, because this candidature and this election represents a certain historicity which, of course, is not to be missed. We leave you with those pictures. Quick break. Right on the other side, we'll have Brass Tack Superfast.